Does God really guide our steps? The Bible says that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. The old saints used to use the term providence, and trusting in the providence of God, how God oversees our lives and the way that we live our lives and the steps that we take. And sometimes we're not always able to see how He is at work or to see the obvious evidence of His hand in our daily dealings, but it's there. It's present. I remember years ago when we were living in Honduras, we were living in the capital, and we still had our house in Guaymaca, where Anna was living at. We had a feeding program that we did there on a weekly basis. And we were having to go back to get things ready for the following week's program and get the rice and the beans and everything bought and bagged up and prepared to give out to the folks in the barrio there. And our driver, who was going to take us, had promised to be at the house at a certain time. It generally was an hour and a half drive there through the mountains, and not always the safest of roads, but the hour came for him to be there, and he wasn't there. And another hour passed, and another hour passed, and of course as time wore on we began to think, well, wow, maybe we ought to put off the trip. Maybe we ought to wait, maybe go either the next day or just wait till the beginning of the week to go, even though that would be pushing things quite a bit. And I remember at the time I was sick. I had a bad staph infection, a lot of issues that were going on in my body, and just didn't really feel like riding that distance. But still, nonetheless, told Anna, I said, well, let's just wait, and we'll still try to plan to go. Of course, she was ready just to call it a day as well. But 3 hours later, after the fact, when he was supposed to be there, our driver showed up, and of course there were two other people who were going to be going with us, and he had been having to get his car worked on. And get some electrical issues fixed in it and done in order to make the trip there. So we hop in his vehicle, and literally this vehicle was 20 years old. It was falling apart just about in every area of the vehicle, and it wasn't the safest. And I was crammed in the back seat, my knees up into my chin, and we started on our way. Come to find out, on the way through the mountains, we had to make several stops along the way. And a trip that generally took about an hour and a half took us about 3.5 hours to get there. So we get out at the house, and I get ready to open the door, and I hear a noise on the inside. And when I open the door, the whole house is full of water, about an inch deep. I mean, it's everywhere all over the floor. So I ran in the house, and I could hear a noise coming from the bathroom, and when I got into the bathroom, there was a small little tube on the back of the toilet that had burst, and water was just flowing out of it. Of course, water was starting to run out the back door onto the back patio and down into the yard. Of course, we got the water, turned off, and we began to, sweep out the floor. It was concrete floor, thankfully. There were no carpet or rugs or anything in there, and we began to clean that up. Well, I went out to the back in order to turn the water pump on and get it going, and when I did, nothing happened. And I went inside and told one of the men there that, the pump wouldn't come on. And when we went back out, we began to smell something burning. Not a good sign. And ended up finding out that the pump itself had been burned up, and we were going to have to buy a new pump, which we could not get there in Guaymaca. We would have to get back in the capital. As I thought about that, I began to think about how that God directed us and kept us, even when we weren't aware of it, going to go to the house, and still made the way for us to get there, even though it was difficult and hard. Because if we had not, there would have been problems beyond what we could comprehend, out into our yard, to the neighbors all around us with the water flooding their properties. It could have been really, really bad. And I began to reflect on how God guides our steps even when we're not aware of it. Why does He do that? Well, it's not because we're good, because we're spiritual enough, or because we prayed up, or we read our Bibles, or anything like that. It's because He loves us. And He guides our steps because He wants to bless us. He wants to bring us into a position of experiencing His blessing. And many times to show us things that we need to know about Him, or maybe that we need to know about other people. I thought about that. I thought, you know what? It was a blessing that he directed and guided our steps there, because it kept us from experiencing greater problems and losing some things in the house that we probably would have lost. It was a blessing to our neighbors. He guided our steps because their yards were not eventually flooded, and literally it would have been a big major problem in their properties if that had happened. So they were blessed. Then we were able to find out something that we would have had no clue about at all concerning the pump on the outside. We were able to discover that, and the only place we could get it was in the capital, where we happened to be living and we're going back to at that time. Thankfully, it was just a little small piece of rubber that had burst. It only cost literally a few cents to get and fix, but God directed our steps. God directs our steps, folks, every day of our lives. We have entrusted ourselves to His care, and sometimes, many times, we're not even aware of Him guiding our steps and directing us. We're not even aware that He is leading us. And again, when we look back and we see that He was, we're amazed. But again, He doesn't do it because we're super spiritual people or because we're prayed up or anything like that. He does it because He loves us, and we have committed ourselves into His hands, and we're just walking with Him. And as He does, again, He does so because He wants to bless us. He wants to bless other people. He wants to show us things that we need to know, many times about Himself, about ourselves, or about other people. So the thing is, you can relax, you can rest, you can trust, and really believe that your Father has your best interest in mind 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. Why? Because He loves you. He really does guide your steps, even when you don't realize it. You spend some time thinking about that and beholding Him who is always beholding you and smiling.